The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, and with it, the kind of pain that doesn't announce itself with screams. It just settles into your chest like a stone dropped into deep water. Mom, you know my fiancé doesn't like you. If you come, you'll make it awkward. I stood in my kitchen, the phone pressed against my ear, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire, and I just knew, that everything I believed about my son, about family, about the life I'd built after losing my husband, had just shattered into pieces too small to glue back together. My name is Margaret Hollins. I'm 67 years old, a retired schoolteacher with arthritis in my left knee and a garden I tend every morning because it gives me a reason to get out of bed. For the last 10 years, since my husband Thomas died from a heart attack in our bedroom, I thought my son Darren was all I had left in this world. I thought wrong. Mom? Are you there? His voice pulled me back. I could picture him on the other end, probably sitting in that expensive apartment downtown that I helped him afford when he was between jobs 3 years ago. The same apartment where his fiancée, Brittany, had made it clear during their housewarming party that my casserole dish wasn't on brand with their aesthetic. I'd smiled then too, just like I was about to smile now. Have you ever felt your heart break so quietly that nobody around you even notices? Have you ever had someone you raised, someone you sacrificed everything for, look you in the eye and tell you that you're not good enough for their important day? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I understand, I said, and my voice came out steady. Too steady. Like I was commenting on the weather instead of accepting that my only child had just uninvited me from his wedding. You do. Darren sounded surprised. Maybe he expected tears. Maybe he expected me to beg. Yes. I understand perfectly. What I understood was this: my son had chosen a woman who saw me as competition instead of family. He'd chosen to keep the peace with her instead of honoring the woman who'd sat up with him through every fever, every nightmare, every heartbreak. He'd chosen wrong, and he didn't even know it yet. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd get it. You've always been so understanding. Understanding. That's what people call it when you swallow your pain to make their lives easier. After he hung up, barely 2 minutes of conversation to erase me from the most important day of his life, I set the phone down on the counter and stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. The afternoon sun made the glass shine like a mirror. I looked old, tired, invisible. My kitchen was the same one I'd cooked in for 35 years. The same countertops where I'd packed Darren's school lunches, where I'd taught him to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl, where I'd sat across from Thomas during our last breakfast together before his heart gave out. Everything in this house held memories, and most of them involved giving pieces of myself away to people who didn't seem to remember. I walked to the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients for dinner. Just me tonight. Just me tomorrow night. Just me for the rest of my life, apparently. My hands moved automatically, cutting vegetables, seasoning chicken, setting the table for one. I'd gotten good at cooking for one. You'd think after 10 years I'd be used to it, but some kinds of loneliness you never stop feeling. The wedding was in 3 weeks. A beach ceremony in Santa Barbara, about 2 hours away. The whole family had been invited. My sister Linda called me last week to talk about what she was wearing. My nephew posted on Facebook about his hotel reservation. Even my ex-brother-in-law, who hadn't spoken to our family in 15 years, somehow made the guest list. Everyone except me. I ate my dinner in silence, scrolling through my phone. Brittany had already posted about the wedding, photos of invitation samples, a picture of her dress fitting, a video of the venue with the caption "Dreams Coming True." She had 1,200 followers who commented with heart emojis and congratulations. I wasn't tagged in anything. I wasn't mentioned. I was a ghost in my own son's story. But here's what nobody knew, what I hadn't told a single soul in my family: I wasn't as alone as they thought. For over a year, I'd been seeing someone. His name was Harold Whitmore, and he made me feel like a woman again instead of just somebody's mother or somebody's widow. That night, after I washed my single plate and put away my single fork, I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. My knees ached. Everything ached. But I opened my closet anyway and reached for the box on the top shelf, the one covered in dust that I hadn't touched in years. Inside was my wedding dress from 1978. Cream-colored, simple, with lace sleeves that Thomas had loved. I pulled it out and held it against my body, standing in front of the mirror. Could I still fit into this? Did I even want to? Then I thought about Harold's smile. I thought about the way he held doors open for me and asked about my day like he genuinely wanted to know. I thought about how he'd kissed me last week under the oak tree in Washington Park and told me I was beautiful. And I thought about my son, who just told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. A small, dangerous idea started forming in my mind. Not revenge, exactly. Something quieter. Something mine. I folded the dress carefully and put it back in the box. But as I closed the closet door, I whispered something I didn't even know I was thinking. If they can erase me from their story, I'll write my own. The next morning, I called Harold. My hands were shaking when he picked up. Maggie? Everything okay? I took a deep breath. Do you remember what you asked me 6 months ago? What I said I wasn't ready for? There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. I remember. Ask me again. Another pause, longer this time. When Harold spoke again, his voice was soft and careful, like he was holding something fragile. Margaret Hollins, will you marry me? The tears came then, finally, but they weren't sad tears. They were something else entirely. Yes, I said. But I want to do it my way. And I want to do it soon. 3 weeks soon. The same weekend as Darren's wedding, in fact. But he didn't need to know that. Nobody did. Not yet. What happened next changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who thought they could write me out of the story. Because sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one writing the ending nobody sees coming. And this ending? Nobody was ready for it. Chapter 2. People always ask what it takes to raise a child alone. They want the highlight reel, the graduations, the proud moments, the hugs. Nobody asks about the nights you go to bed wondering if you're doing everything wrong. Let me take you back 25 years, to when Darren was just a kid with scraped knees and big dreams. Back when I still believed that if you loved someone hard enough, they'd never forget where they came from. It was 1999, and Thomas had just gotten his promotion at the engineering firm. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Comfortable enough that I could work part-time at Jefferson Elementary, teaching 2nd grade while Darren was in school. Comfortable enough for weekend trips to the lake and ice cream on Fridays. Then Thomas died. Heart attack. 48 years old. Gone before the ambulance even made it to our street. I found him on our bedroom floor, already cold, his coffee mug still sitting on the nightstand with steam rising from it like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Darren was 17. Senior year of high school. He had college applications due in 3 months and a basketball season he was supposed to lead. Instead, he got a funeral and a mother who couldn't stop crying long enough to sign his permission slips. I remember the life insurance agent sitting in our living room, explaining that Thomas's policy would cover the house and maybe 2 years of Darren's college if we were careful. Maybe. If we stretched every dollar until it screamed. What about after 2 years? I'd asked. The agent had looked at me with those sad, pitying eyes people give widows. You'll figure it out. So I did. I went back to work full-time. Then I took on tutoring jobs after school. Then I started teaching summer school. Every extra dollar went into an account labeled Darren's future, because that's what mothers do, we sacrifice our present for our children's tomorrow. When Darren got accepted to State University, I cried. Happy tears that time. He was going to study business, maybe become someone important, maybe live the life Thomas and I had always dreamed about. I sold my wedding rings to pay for his first semester books. Not the engagement ring, I couldn't bring myself to part with that, but the wedding band Thomas had slipped on my finger in 1978. The jeweler offered me $800. It was worth at least twice that, but I needed the money fast and he knew it. I took the cash and told Darren the school had given him a book scholarship. He believed me because he wanted to, because it was easier than asking questions. His sophomore year, the transmission died on my car. $3,000 to fix it. I didn't have $3,000. I had $1,700 in savings and a choice to make, fix my car or pay Darren's spring tuition. I chose tuition. Started taking the bus to work, 2 transfers each way, leaving my house at 6 in the morning to make it to school by 8. My principal, Mrs. Chun, pulled me aside one day and asked if everything was okay. Everything's fine, I'd said, smiling that same smile I'd give my son decades later. The smile that means nothing is fine but you're too proud to admit it. Do you know what it's like to give up everything for someone, only to realize they never noticed? Drop a comment if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most. Darren graduated in 4 years with honors. I was so proud I could barely see straight. At his graduation ceremony, when they called his name, I stood up and cheered louder than anyone else in that stadium. He walked across that stage in a cap and gown I'd ironed the night before, carrying a future I'd bought with every sacrifice I could make. After graduation, he moved to the city for a marketing job. The apartment was expensive, but he said he needed to be close to work. I helped him with a deposit, $2,000 I'd saved from teaching summer school for 3 years straight. He promised he'd pay me back once he got his first paycheck. He never did. Not because he was cruel, but because he forgot. And I never reminded him because that's not what mothers do. His first year in the city was rough. The job didn't pay as much as he'd hoped, and his roommate bailed on him after 6 months. Darren called me crying one night, saying he might have to move back home, that he'd failed. "You haven't failed," I told him. "You just hit a bump." I sent him money. $500 here, $300 there. Grocery money when his paycheck didn't stretch far enough. Gas money when his car broke down. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for 3 months so my son could make rent in an apartment 2 hours away. Then he met Brittany. She worked in advertising, made good money, wore expensive shoes. The first time Darren brought her home for dinner, she walked through my house like she was touring a museum of poor decisions. She touched my curtains, the ones I'd sewn myself in 1995, and said, "Vintage. Interesting choice." It wasn't a compliment. I made pot roast that night, my specialty. Thomas used to say my pot roast could make a grown man weep. But Brittany picked at hers and asked if I had any quinoa instead. I didn't know what quinoa was. She laughed like I'd told a joke. Darren laughed too. Not a mean laugh, just agreeing with her. Choosing her side without even realizing there were sides. That dinner was 3 years ago. Things got worse from there. When Darren got promoted, Brittany threw him a party at their apartment. She invited everyone from his office, friends from college, people I'd never heard of. I showed up with a homemade cake, German chocolate, Darren's favorite since he was 6 years old. Brittany took one look at it and said, "Oh, we already ordered from that fancy bakery downtown. But thanks." She put my cake on the kitchen counter and never served it. I watched people eat store-bought cupcakes while my cake sat there like a forgotten gift. I left early. Darren didn't notice. The housewarming party was worse. I brought a casserole, nothing fancy, just the kind of comfort food I'd been making for decades. Brittany took it with 2 fingers like it might bite her and said, "This isn't really on brand with our aesthetic, but I'm sure someone will eat it." Nobody did. I found it in the trash on my way to the bathroom, still in my dish. I washed the dish in their sink, dried it with their expensive hand towels, and drove home in silence. That night, I called my sister Linda. "Am I imagining things?" I asked. "Does his fiancé hate me, or am I being paranoid?" Linda hesitated too long before answering. "She's just different from us, Maggie. You know these young career women. They have their own way of doing things." But it wasn't about career women or different generations. It was about respect. And Brittany didn't respect me because Darren had never told her who I really was, not the awkward mother who showed up with homemade food, but the woman who'd given up everything so he could become the man she loved. Last Christmas, they didn't come home. Brittany's family was having a ski trip in Aspen, and wouldn't it be rude not to go? Darren called me on Christmas morning, his voice cheerful and distant like a radio signal cutting in and out. "Merry Christmas, Mom. We're having such a great time. Brittany's dad rented this amazing cabin. You'd love it." I spent Christmas alone, eating leftover turkey and watching old movies. The tree I'd decorated sat in the corner, presents underneath it that nobody would open. I'd bought Darren a watch, not expensive but nice, and Brittany a scarf I thought she might like. I mailed them both in January. Darren texted me a thank you. Brittany never acknowledged hers. And now, after all of it, after the sacrifices and the silence and the slow erasure of my place in his life, my son had called to tell me I wasn't invited to his wedding. The boy I'd carried in my body for 9 months. The child I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through illnesses. The teenager I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college. The man I'd propped up every time he stumbled. That boy had looked at me through the phone and decided I wasn't worth the awkwardness. I sat in my living room that night, looking at photo albums. Pictures of Darren as a baby, as a kid, as a young man. In every single photo where he was smiling, I was somewhere in the frame, holding him, standing behind him, cheering him on. But in his wedding, I'd be nowhere. Erased. Like I'd never mattered at all. I closed the album and made a decision. Not a vengeful decision, not yet. Just a quiet promise to myself, I would not spend another day making myself smaller so other people could feel bigger. Harold called me that night, like he always did around 9 o'clock. "How was your day, Maggie?" For the first time in weeks, I told the truth. "Terrible. But it's about to get better." "What do you mean?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I mean I'm done being invisible." What I didn't tell him, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd already started planning something that would make sure I was never invisible again. Something that would remind my son, and everyone else, that Margaret Hollins was still very much alive. And she was about to do something unforgettable. Chapter 3. The morning of Darren's wedding arrived like any other Saturday, except everything felt wrong. The sun came up too bright. The birds sang too loud. My coffee tasted bitter no matter how much sugar I added. I stood in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, still in my bathrobe, watching the clock tick toward the hour when my son would get married without me. The wedding started at 2 o'clock. By now, Darren was probably having breakfast with his groomsmen at some expensive brunch place, laughing and taking photos. Brittany was probably at the salon getting her hair done into whatever complicated style rich brides wear. The whole family was probably already on the road to Santa Barbara, excited about the beach ceremony and the open bar reception. And I was here, alone, eating scrambled eggs at my kitchen table like this was just another ordinary day. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Linda, heading to the venue. "Looks beautiful. Wish you were here. Wish you were here." Like I'd chosen not to come. Like I'd turned down an invitation instead of never receiving one. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened Instagram. I shouldn't have, but I did anyway. It's like pressing on a bruise just to make sure it still hurts. Brittany's account lit up my screen. Story after story. A photo of her and her bridesmaids in matching silk robes, champagne glasses raised. A video of the venue, white chairs on the sand, an arch covered in roses, the ocean sparkling in the background. Another photo of her dress hanging in the bridal suite, all lace and elegance and money. The caption on that one said, "Today I marry my best friend." Nothing could make this more perfect. Nothing. Not even having your fiancé's mother there. I set my phone face down on the table and took a long breath. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped rubber bands around my ribs and kept pulling them tighter. This was really happening. My son was really getting married, and I was really sitting here alone while everyone else celebrated. Have you ever been excluded from something so important that it changed how you saw yourself? Tell me in the comments. I know I'm not the only one who's felt this kind of pain. The hours crawled by. 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock. 11. I tried to distract myself. I washed dishes that were already clean. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I stared at the television without seeing anything on the screen. At noon, my phone rang. "Harold. Maggie, I'm worried about you. Are you okay?" I wanted to lie. I wanted to say I was fine, that I was handling it. But my voice cracked when I tried to speak, and then I was crying, big, ugly sobs that I couldn't control. "No," I whispered. "I'm not okay. I'm so far from okay I can't even see it from here. I'm coming over." "Harold, you don't have to. I'm already in the car." He showed up 20 minutes later with flowers from the grocery store and Chinese takeout. We sat on my couch, and I cried into his shoulder while he held me and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. Sometimes the best comfort is just presence. "I raised him," I said into Harold's shirt. "I gave him everything. How did I raise someone who could do this to me?" Harold stroked my hair. "You didn't raise someone cruel, Maggie. You raised someone who got lost. There's a difference." At 2 o'clock exactly, I imagined the ceremony starting. Darren standing at the altar in his tuxedo. Brittany walking down the aisle in that expensive dress. The officiant saying words about love and commitment and family. My sister Linda probably crying in the front row. My nephew taking photos. Everyone smiling. Everyone except me, because I wasn't there. My phone exploded with notifications. Facebook, Instagram, everyone posting photos and videos in real time. I should have turned it off. I should have put it away. But I couldn't stop watching my own exclusion play out on social media. There was Darren, looking handsome and happy. There was Brittany, radiant in her dress. There was the kiss, the cheers, the celebration. Hundreds of people commenting congratulations, heart emojis, crying face emojis. So beautiful. What a perfect couple. Best day ever. I scrolled through every post, every photo, every comment. I tortured myself with it. There was my sister dancing. My nephew giving a toast. Even my ex-brother-in-law was there, clapping and smiling like he was part of the family. But in every single photo, there was an absence. A space where I should have been. Darren's mother, the woman who'd made him possible, was nowhere in the frame. Harold watched me scrolling. Maggie, you're only hurting yourself. I know, I said. But I kept scrolling anyway. One post stopped me cold. It was from one of Brittany's friends, a woman I'd never met. She'd posted a photo of the wedding party on the beach, everyone laughing, and the caption said, "Finally. A drama-free wedding with only the people who matter. So happy for these two." Drama-free. Because I wasn't there. Because removing me had made everything better. I set my phone down and stood up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I need to do something, I said. I can't just sit here and take this. Harold stood too. What do you want to do? I looked at him, this kind, patient man who'd spent the last year treating me like I mattered. Who'd asked me to marry him 6 months ago and waited when I said I wasn't ready. Who'd shown up today with flowers and takeout just to make sure I wasn't alone. I want to stop being the woman everyone forgets, I said. I want to matter again. Harold took my hands. You've always mattered, Maggie. They just can't see it. Then maybe it's time to make them see. That's when the idea that had been forming in the back of my mind for 3 weeks finally crystallized into something real. Something solid. Something I could actually do. I pulled up Harold's number from 6 months ago, the voicemail he'd left after proposing. I'd listened to it 100 times but never responded. His voice, nervous and hopeful. Maggie, I know it's fast, and I know you're not ready, but I love you. I want to spend whatever time we have left making you happy. Think about it. I'd thought about it. For 6 months I'd thought about it. And I'd said no because I didn't want to overshadow Darren's engagement. I didn't want to take attention away from his big news. I'd made myself smaller again, so he could shine brighter. And look where it got me. Harold, I said, still holding his hands. Remember when you asked me to marry you? His eyes widened. Of course. Ask me again. He blinked. Right now. Right now. Harold got down on one knee right there in my living room, between the couch and the coffee table, in front of the television that was still showing some mindless show I hadn't been watching. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the same small velvet box he'd shown me 6 months ago. Margaret Hollins, he said, his voice steady and sure, will you marry me? The tears came again, but different tears this time. Not the tears of exclusion and pain. Tears of something else. Something that felt almost like freedom. Yes, I said. Yes. 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on my finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing flashy, but it was mine. Ours. And when he stood up and kissed me, I felt something shift inside my chest. The tightness loosened. The rubber bands snapped. When? Harold asked. When do you want to get married? I looked at my phone, at all those wedding photos from the beach in Santa Barbara. At my son's perfect day that didn't include me. Soon, I said. Very soon. Harold studied my face. How soon? I smiled. Not the fake smile I'd been wearing for years. A real smile. The kind that has teeth. How do you feel about next weekend? His eyebrows shot up. Next weekend? That's 7 days away. Exactly. 1 week after my son's perfect wedding. Think we can pull it off? Harold laughed, surprised and delighted. Are you serious? Dead serious. I want something small. Intimate. Just us and a few close friends. Nothing fancy. Just real. Where? I thought about it. About the beach where Darren was getting married right now. About how much I'd always loved the ocean. The beach, I said. I want to get married on the beach too. But not Santa Barbara. Somewhere that's ours. Harold pulled out his phone and started typing. Corona del Mar? I know a spot. Beautiful beach, public access, we could set up something simple. Perfect, I said. Let's do it. What about photos? I thought about my friend Ellen, who'd retired from teaching the same year I did. Ellen had taken up photography as a hobby, invested in a fancy camera and editing software. She was always posting dramatic sunset photos on Facebook. I know someone, I said. Someone who'll make it beautiful. Harold was grinning now, caught up in the momentum. This is crazy, Maggie. I know. Your family is going to lose their minds. I know that too. And your son. My son, I interrupted, uninvited me from the most important day of his life. So I'm going to create an important day of my own. One where I'm not forgotten. One where I matter. I called Ellen right then, still standing in my living room with Harold's arms around me. She picked up on the second ring. Ellen? It's Margaret. How would you like to film a wedding next Saturday? There was a pause. Whose wedding? Mine. Ellen screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What? When did this happen? Who's the groom? Why didn't you tell me you were engaged? I laughed. It's complicated. But I need you. Can you do it? Are you kidding? I'd be honored. Do you want photos or video? Both. I want it to look like something out of a movie. Can you do that? Girl, I've been waiting my whole life for someone to ask me that question. Consider it done. After I hung up, I looked at Harold. He was watching me with this expression I couldn't quite read, part amazement, part concern. You know what this looks like, right? He said carefully. Getting married 1 week after your son. People are going to think you're trying to compete with him. Let them think whatever they want, I said. I'm done living my life based on what other people think. But here's what I didn't tell Harold, what I didn't tell anyone. This wasn't just about getting married. This was about reclaiming something that had been taken from me. My dignity. My place in the story. My right to be seen. Darren had tried to erase me. And I was about to make sure that was impossible. The rest of that evening passed in a blur of planning. Harold and I called the beach office, reserved a spot. Called a local florist, ordered simple bouquets. Found an officiant online who could do a short ceremony. It wasn't going to be fancy. It wasn't going to be expensive. But it was going to be mine. That night, after Harold went home, I sat alone in my bedroom and looked at the wedding photos still flooding my social media. Darren cutting the cake. Darren dancing with Brittany. Darren smiling like he'd won the lottery. And I thought, he has no idea what's coming. 1 week. 7 days. Then the world would see what Margaret Hollins looked like when she stopped making herself invisible. And my son? He was about to learn that the woman he'd forgotten was the one person he should have remembered. Chapter 4. I met Harold Whitmore on a Tuesday afternoon in October, almost 18 months ago. The kind of day where the leaves were just starting to turn and the air smelled like someone's fireplace down the street. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't looking for anything except a good book and maybe some peace and quiet at the Riverside Community Book Club. My friend Ellen had dragged me there after months of insisting I needed to get out of the house more and meet new people. You can't spend the rest of your life alone with your memories, she'd said, which felt harsh but wasn't wrong. The book club met every other Tuesday at the public library in a room that smelled like old paper and coffee. That day we were discussing some bestseller I hadn't finished, but I showed up anyway because Ellen would have killed me if I bailed. Harold was sitting across the circle from me, a tall man with gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He wore a cardigan sweater that looked hand-knitted and held his book like it was something precious. When it was his turn to talk, he spoke quietly about the themes of loss in the story, about how the main character reminded him of his late wife. She used to say that grief doesn't get smaller, he said. You just get bigger around it. You build a life that's large enough to hold both the grief and the joy. Something about the way he said it made my chest ache. After the meeting ended and everyone was having coffee and cookies, I found myself standing next to him at the snack table. Your wife, I said. When did she pass? He looked at me with these kind brown eyes. 3 years ago. Cancer. You? My husband. 10 years ago. Heart attack. We stood there for a moment, two strangers bonded by the worst thing that had ever happened to us. Then Harold smiled. Want to get real coffee? This library stuff tastes like dishwater. We went to the diner down the street, the one with the red vinyl booths and the waitress who called everyone hon. We sat there for 3 hours talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his wife Patricia, and how she'd loved gardening. I told him about Thomas and how he'd always burned the toast but refused to admit it. Harold had been a high school English teacher for 40 years before retiring. No kids, he and Patricia had tried but it never happened. Now he spent his days reading, volunteering at the library, and fixing things around his neighborhood because he couldn't stand to sit still. What about you? He asked. What do you do with your time? I thought about my empty house and my empty days. I exist, I said honestly. I garden. I read. I wait for my son to call, which doesn't happen as much as I'd like. That's not existing, Margaret. That's just waiting. There's a difference. Nobody had called me Margaret in years. Everyone called me Mom or Mrs. Hollins or Maggie. But when Harold said Margaret, it sounded like a real name for a real person, not just someone's mother or someone's widow. We started meeting for coffee every week. Just coffee, nothing romantic. We talk about books and life and all the things that didn't matter and all the things that did. He made me laugh. I'd forgotten what that felt like. One afternoon about 3 months after we met, Harold showed up at the diner with a small potted plant. For your garden, he said. I noticed you mentioned the rosemary died. It was such a small thing. A $5 plant from the hardware store. But I'd mentioned my dead rosemary plant exactly once, in passing, 6 weeks earlier. And he'd remembered. That's when I started to wonder if maybe this was more than friendship. Do you believe in second chances at love? Have you ever met someone who made you feel alive again when you thought that part of your life was over? Let me know in the comments. The first time Harold kissed me was in Washington Park under the big oak tree where we'd started meeting because it was halfway between both our houses. It was spring, almost 6 months after we met, and the tree was covered in new leaves. We were sitting on a bench, and I was telling him about Darren's upcoming promotion. You must be proud, Harold said. I am. I just wish. I don't know. I wish he called more. I wish I felt less like an obligation and more like a person he actually wants to talk to. Harold looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, Margaret, can I tell you something? Of course. Your son is an idiot if he doesn't see how remarkable you are. I laughed. I'm not remarkable. I'm just a retired teacher with a garden and too much time on my hands. No, Harold said firmly. You're a woman who raised a child alone. Who worked 3 jobs to put him through college. Who sacrificed everything and never asked for credit. That's not ordinary. That's extraordinary. Something in his voice made my breath catch. Harold. He leaned in and kissed me. Soft and gentle and careful, like he was afraid I might break. When he pulled back, he looked almost scared. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have. I kissed him back. Right there under the oak tree, in broad daylight, like a teenager instead of a 66-year-old widow. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt like Margaret again, not just Mom. We dated in secret after that. I don't know why I kept it quiet. Maybe because I didn't want to deal with questions from my family. Maybe because I wanted something that was just mine. Darren never asked if I was seeing anyone, and I never volunteered the information. Harold and I fell into an easy rhythm. Sunday brunches at his house where he'd make pancakes and burn them just a little, like Thomas used to. Friday evening walks in the park. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market. He met Ellen and my other close friends, but I never introduced him to Darren. When are you going to tell your son about me? Harold asked one day. Soon, I said. But soon never came. The truth was, I was afraid. Afraid Darren would judge me for moving on. Afraid he'd think I was replacing his father. Afraid he'd find some reason to disapprove because that seemed to be all he did lately. Disapprove of my cooking, my decorating, my very existence. Last winter, Harold and I took a trip to the coast. Just a weekend, nothing fancy. We stayed in a little bed and breakfast and walked on the beach and ate fish tacos from a food truck. One evening, we sat on the sand watching the sunset, and Harold took my hand. I want to ask you something, he said. And I need you to really think about it before you answer. My heart started pounding. Okay. Margaret, I'm 71 years old. I don't have time to waste on things that don't matter. And you matter to me. More than I thought I could care about anyone again after Patricia. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple ring, gold band, small diamond, nothing flashy. I know it hasn't been that long, he continued. And I know you might not be ready. But I love you, and I want to spend whatever time we have left making you happy. Will you marry me? I stared at that ring like it was a bomb about to explode. Marriage. Again. At 67 years old. It seemed impossible. It seemed crazy. It seemed wonderful. But then I thought about Darren. He'd just gotten engaged to Brittany. This was his time, his moment. If I said yes to Harold, if I announced my own engagement, wouldn't I be stealing his thunder? Wouldn't I be making it about me instead of him? I need time, I said. Can I think about it? Harold smiled, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. Of course. Take all the time you need. I thought about it for 6 months. 6 months of Harold asking occasionally if I'd made a decision, and me saying not yet. 6 months of him being patient and kind while I tried to figure out if I deserved to be happy. Then Darren called and uninvited me from his wedding. And suddenly the decision became crystal clear. The day after that phone call when I said yes to Harold, I finally understood something. I'd been waiting for permission to be happy. Permission from my son, from my family, from some invisible authority that didn't exist. But nobody was going to give me that permission. I had to give it to myself. Now, with 7 days until our beach wedding, I watched Harold plan our ceremony with a kind of enthusiasm I hadn't seen in anyone in years. He called his brother in Arizona, invited a few friends from his volunteer work, talked to the florist about what flowers would hold up in the ocean breeze. Are you nervous? He asked me one night. Terrified, I admitted. About marrying me? No. About what happens after. When everyone finds out. Harold pulled me close. Let them find out. This isn't about them, Maggie. This is about us. About 2 people who got a second chance and were brave enough to take it. But it wasn't just about us anymore, and we both knew it. Whether I'd intended it or not, this wedding had become something bigger. A statement. A line in the sand. My sister Linda called that week, still gushing about Darren's wedding. It was so beautiful, Maggie. You should have seen it. Darren looked so happy. That's great, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. I missed you though. It felt wrong, you not being there. Then why didn't you say something? The words came out sharper than I intended. You knew I wasn't invited. You could have stood up for me. Linda was quiet for a moment. It wasn't my place. I'm your sister. If it wasn't your place, whose place was it? She didn't have an answer for that. Linda, I said, I'm getting married next Saturday. I'd love for you to come. Silence. Then, what? You're getting married? To who? When did this happen? His name is Harold. We've been together for over a year. And yes, I'm getting married. 1 week from today. 1 week after Darren's wedding? Linda's voice rose. Maggie, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. But what will people think? It looks like you're trying to compete with him. Let them think whatever they want, I said, echoing the words I'd told Harold. I'm done living my life for other people's opinions. Are you coming or not? Linda hesitated. I need to think about it. You do that, I said, and hung up. 3 days before the wedding, Ellen showed up at my house with her camera equipment and a plan. I've been watching wedding videography tutorials on YouTube, she said excitedly. I know exactly how to make this look professional. Drone shots, close-ups, the works. Ellen, you don't have to go crazy. Are you kidding? This is my moment. I've been taking pictures of flowers and sunsets for 2 years. This is my chance to do something that matters. She was more excited than I was. We spent the afternoon planning shots, discussing lighting, talking about what I should wear. I'd found a simple cream-colored dress at a boutique, nothing fancy, but it made me feel beautiful. You're going to blow everyone's mind, Ellen said. They have no idea what's coming. She was right. They had no idea. 2 days before the wedding, Darren texted me. The first time I'd heard from him since the day he uninvited me. Thanks for being understanding about the wedding, Mom. Brittany and I really appreciate it. Everything went perfectly. I stared at that text for a long time. Thanks for being understanding. Like I'd done him a favor by accepting my own exclusion. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, I'm glad you had a good day. Short. Neutral. Nothing that would give away what was coming. Because in 48 hours, Harold and I would be standing on a beach in Corona del Mar, exchanging vows in front of people who actually wanted us there. Ellen would be capturing every moment with her fancy camera. And the world would finally see that Margaret Hollins wasn't someone who could be erased. I was someone who could write her own story. And this story was about to have a plot twist nobody saw coming. Not even me. Chapter 5. The morning of my wedding, I woke up at 5:30 without an alarm. The sky outside my window was still dark, but I couldn't sleep anymore. My heart was doing this weird flutter thing, and my hands felt shaky when I reached for my phone. 43 notifications. For a second, panic seized me. Had someone found out? Had word gotten out early? But when I checked, they were just the usual things: spam emails, a reminder about a dentist appointment I'd scheduled months ago, a notification that Ellen had tagged me in a Facebook post about being ready to capture magic today. I sat up in bed and took a long breath. Today was the day. Today I was getting married. At 67 years old, I was becoming a bride again. The thought made me smile and terrified me in equal measure. I made coffee and stood at my kitchen window watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and orange. Somewhere across town, Harold was probably awake too, maybe just as nervous. We decided to spend the night before apart, old-fashioned like that. He'd kissed me goodbye yesterday afternoon and said, "Next time I see you, you'll be walking toward me on a beach." The ceremony was at 2 o'clock. We'd kept the guest list small, just 12 people. Ellen and her husband. Harold's brother who was flying in from Arizona. A few friends from the book club. My neighbor Mrs. Chun who'd always been kind to me. And my sister Linda, who'd finally called back 2 days ago and said, "I'll be there. Someone needs to be on your side." I didn't invite Darren. That probably sounds petty, but I couldn't handle the drama. This day was supposed to be about joy, not about managing my son's feelings or dealing with Brittany's judgment. By 8 o'clock, Ellen showed up with her entire camera kit and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. She'd brought her assistant, her 22-year-old nephew Marcus, who apparently had an eye for angles, and together they transformed my living room into a makeshift preparation studio. "Okay, Maggie, let's get you ready for your close-up," Ellen said, pulling out makeup brushes and hair products like she was preparing for a Hollywood premiere instead of a simple beach wedding. "Ellen, it's just a small ceremony. You don't need to." "Shut up and sit down," she said cheerfully. "This is going viral, trust me. And when it does, you're going to thank me for making you look spectacular." Going viral. The words sent a little shiver through me. Ellen had mentioned it before, but I'd brushed it off. Now, sitting in my living room while she worked on my hair, the reality of it started to sink in. If this went viral, if the video got shared beyond our small circle of friends, Darren would see it. My whole family would see it. Everyone who'd been at his wedding would see that I'd had my own. "You're thinking too hard," Ellen said, watching my face in the mirror. "I can literally see the worry lines forming. What if this backfires? What if people think I'm trying to compete with my son?" Ellen stopped mid-curl and looked me dead in the eye. "Maggie, honey, you're not competing with anyone. You're living your life. There's a difference. But the timing. The timing is perfect. You're showing everyone that you don't need their permission to be happy. That's not competition. That's freedom." She went back to work on my hair, creating soft waves that made me look younger somehow. Marcus was setting up lighting in the corner, testing angles, mumbling something about golden hour and cinematic composition. Is there anything wrong with finding happiness on your own terms, even if the timing seems controversial? Drop your thoughts below, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. By noon, I was dressed and ready. The cream-colored dress fit perfectly, flowing and elegant without being too formal. Ellen had done my makeup, nothing heavy, just enough to make me look radiant instead of tired. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked happy. Actually, genuinely happy. When was the last time I'd looked like that? Harold is going to lose his mind when he sees you, Ellen said, taking practice shots with her camera. Marcus, get this. Get her looking out the window. Perfect. That's money right there. At 1 o'clock, we loaded into Ellen's SUV and drove to Corona del Marche. The beach was beautiful, white sand, blue water, cliffs in the background. Harold had picked a spot near the tide pools where we'd have some privacy but still get the ocean breeze and the sound of waves. When we arrived, Harold was already there with his brother James and the officiant. He was wearing a simple gray suit, no tie, and when he saw me walking across the sand, his face just lit up. Like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Margaret, he breathed when I reached him. You look old. I joked, trying to calm my nerves. Perfect, he said. You look absolutely perfect. The ceremony itself was short and sweet. The officiant, a kind woman named Sarah who Harold had found online, talked about second chances and how love doesn't have an expiration date. Harold and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Margaret, Harold said, his voice shaking slightly, when I met you, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd had my great love story, and all that was left was waiting. But you showed me that life isn't about waiting for the end. It's about being brave enough to begin again. I promise to make you laugh every day. I promise to remember that you're not just someone's mother or someone's widow, you're Margaret, and that's more than enough. I had to wipe my eyes before I could speak. Harold, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, the feeling that I matter. Not because of what I do for other people, but because of who I am. You see me. Really see me. And I promise to spend the rest of our lives making sure you know how rare and precious that is. We exchanged rings, simple gold bands that matched. When Sarah said, "You may kiss the bride," Harold kissed me like we were 20 years old instead of pushing 70. Our friends cheered. Ellen's camera clicked furiously. Marcus was flying his drone overhead, capturing shots from above. It was perfect. Simple and honest and ours. After the ceremony, we had a small reception right there on the beach. Harold's brother had brought champagne. Mrs. Chen had made a cake. We sat on blankets in the sand, eating and laughing and watching the sun move across the sky. Speech, someone called out. Harold stood up, pulling me up with him. I just want to say thank you to everyone who came today. When you get to be our age, you realize that every moment of happiness is a gift. And today, standing here with Margaret, surrounded by people who love us, this is the best gift I could ask for. Everyone raised their glasses. I felt tears running down my face again, but this time they were good tears. Happy tears. The kind that come from joy instead of pain. Ellen pulled me aside later while everyone was mingling. Maggie, the footage is incredible. Marcus and I got everything. The ceremony, the vows, the kiss, all of it. And I'm thinking, what if we made this into something special? What do you mean? I mean really special. Professional level editing. Music. Captions. The whole cinematic treatment. Make it into a video that tells your story. My stomach fluttered. Ellen, I don't know. Think about it. Your story, the mother who got excluded from her son's wedding, who chose to create her own happiness instead of wallowing in pain, that's powerful. People need to see that. Especially older women who think their stories are over. But Darren made his choice. Now you get to make yours. Do you want this beautiful day to stay small and hidden? Or do you want to celebrate it the way it deserves to be celebrated? I looked over at Harold, who was talking animatedly with his brother, his face bright with happiness. I thought about how many years I'd spent making myself smaller, quieter, less important. I thought about my son's wedding, and how I'd sat alone in my kitchen while everyone else celebrated. "Make the video," I said. "Make it beautiful." Ellen grinned. "Oh honey, beautiful doesn't even cover it. I'm going to make it unforgettable." That evening, after all the guests had left and the beach was quiet again, Harold and I walked along the water's edge. I was still in my dress, he was still in his suit jacket, and we were both barefoot with our shoes in our hands. "Mrs. Whitmore," Harold said, testing out my new name. "How does that sound?" "Strange," I admitted. "I was Mrs. Hollins for 43 years. You can keep your name if you want. I don't mind." I thought about it. Margaret Hollins had been the widow, the retired teacher, the forgotten mother. Maybe Margaret Whitmore could be something different. Someone new. "I like it," I said. "Margaret Whitmore. It sounds like a fresh start." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just listening to the waves. Then Harold said, "Are you worried about what happens next? When people find out?" "Terrified," I admitted. "We could keep it quiet. Not post anything. Just let it be our secret." But even as he said it, I knew that wasn't what I wanted. Ellen was right. This wasn't just about me and Harold. This was about refusing to be invisible. This was about showing every person who'd ever been discarded or forgotten that they could still write their own story. "No," I said. "Let people find out. Let them talk. I'm done hiding." Harold squeezed my hand. "Then let them talk." We stayed on the beach until sunset, watching the sky turn purple and gold. When we finally headed home, to Harold's house, which was now our house, I felt lighter than I had in years. Like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. Ellen texted me later that night, "Videos coming together. It's gorgeous. Should be ready to post tomorrow. You ready for this?" I stared at that message for a long time before responding. Was I ready? Ready for my family to see? Ready for Darren to find out? Ready for the potential backlash and judgment? I typed back, "Post it." 3 letters. 1 decision. And absolutely no idea what was about to happen. That night, lying next to Harold in our bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing ahead to tomorrow, to the video going live, to what would happen when people saw it. Harold rolled over and pulled me close. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we face it together." "Okay." "Okay," I whispered. But I wasn't prepared for what was actually coming. Nobody was. Because when Ellen posted that video the next morning, with its sweeping drone shots and emotional vows and that caption about respect and second chances, it didn't just get shared among our friends. It exploded. Within hours, thousands of people had viewed it. Within a day, it had hundreds of thousands of views. Comments poured in from strangers around the world, people saying they were crying, that this was the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen, that I was an inspiration. My phone started buzzing non-stop. Messages from relatives I hadn't talked to in years. Friend requests from people I'd never met. And right in the middle of all those notifications, one name that made my heart stop. Darren. He'd seen the video. And he was calling. I stared at my phone, watching it ring and ring. Harold looked at me with concern. "You don't have to answer." But I did have to answer. Because this conversation, whatever it was going to be, had been coming for a long time. Maybe my whole life. I picked up the phone. "Mom." His voice was tight, controlled. Angry. "We need to talk." "Hello, Darren," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "What the hell were you thinking?" And just like that, everything I'd been afraid of was about to come crashing down. But here's the thing I'd learned standing on that beach yesterday, saying vows to a man who saw me as more than just somebody's mother. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of my son's anger. Not of my family's judgment. Not of anything. Because for the first time in 10 years, I was living for myself instead of everyone else. And whatever came next, whether it was reconciliation or permanent damage, I'd face it as Margaret Whitmore, a woman who'd chosen joy even when the world tried to tell her she didn't deserve it. The conversation with Darren was about to change everything. But the real change had already happened. I'd stopped being invisible. And there was no going back from that. Chapter 6. What the hell were you thinking? Darren's voice came through the phone like a slap, sharp and accusatory. I stood in Harold's living room, my living room now, holding the phone with one hand and gripping the back of the couch with the other. Harold watched me from across the room, ready to step in if I needed him. But this conversation was mine to have. I was thinking, I said carefully, that I deserved to be happy too. Happy. Darren's laugh was bitter. You got married 1 week after my wedding. 1 week, Mom. Do you have any idea how that looks? How does it look, Darren? Tell me. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing, trying to control his anger. It looks like you were trying to steal my thunder. Like you couldn't stand that Brittany and I had our moment, so you had to create your own to compete with us. The accusation hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to apologize, to smooth things over like I'd been doing my whole life. But a bigger part, the part that had stood on a beach yesterday and promised to stop making herself invisible, refused to back down. Steal your thunder, I repeated slowly. Darren, do you know what day your wedding was? What? Of course I know. It was a Saturday. A beautiful Saturday in Santa Barbara. The whole family was there. Cousins, uncles, even your father's brother who nobody's seen in 15 years. Everyone was there. Except me. Silence. You uninvited your own mother from your wedding, I continued, my voice steady but firm. You called me and told me that your fiancé didn't like me, and if I came, I'd make things awkward. Do you remember that conversation? Mom, I explained. You explained nothing. You made a choice. You chose to exclude the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, because your fiancé found me inconvenient. And I said okay. I said I understood. I sat in my kitchen alone while you got married. You could have fought harder. You could have. What? I interrupted. Begged you to let me attend my own son's wedding? Convinced you that I was worth having there? Darren, a mother shouldn't have to beg for a place at her child's side. I could hear him breathing heavily now, struggling for words. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Quieter. So this was revenge? Getting married a week later was your way of getting back at me? No, I said, and I meant it. This wasn't revenge. This was me deciding that if my son didn't want me at his wedding, I'd create my own moment of joy. Harold proposed to me months ago, and I said no because I didn't want to overshadow your engagement. I put my happiness on hold for you. Again. But when you uninvited me, I realized something. I've been putting my happiness on hold my entire life. Have you ever had to choose between your own happiness and keeping the peace with family? It's one of the hardest decisions anyone can make. Share your story in the comments. Darren was quiet for a long moment. Then, but why did it have to go viral? Why did Ellen have to post that video for the whole world to see? Because it was beautiful, I said simply. Because after years of being invisible, I wanted to be seen. Is that so wrong? But now everyone's talking about it. People at my work saw it. Brittany's family saw it. Everyone's comparing your wedding to mine, and guess what, Mom? Yours is getting more attention. Do you know how embarrassing that is? And there it was. The real issue. Not that I'd gotten married. Not even the timing. But that my moment had somehow become bigger than his. I'm sorry you're embarrassed, I said, and I genuinely was. But I'm not sorry I got married. I'm not sorry people saw it. And I'm not sorry that for once in my life, I did something that made me happy without asking permission first. This isn't fair, Darren said, and for the first time, he sounded less angry and more hurt. You're making me look like the bad guy. I'm not making you look like anything, Darren. You uninvited me from your wedding. That's a fact. I got married anyway. That's also a fact. How people interpret those facts is up to them. So what now? He asked. We just don't talk anymore? You're married to some guy I've never even met, and that's it. The words stung. Some guy I've never even met. Because I'd never told him about Harold. Because I'd kept that part of my life private, afraid of his judgment. His name is Harold Whitmore, I said. He's 71 years old, a retired English teacher, and he's kind and patient and makes me feel like I matter. I'd love for you to meet him. I'd love for you to be part of this new chapter of my life. But only if you can be happy for me. Happy for you, Darren repeated, like he was testing the words. While you're making a spectacle of yourself online? It's not a spectacle, it's my life. And if you can't tell the difference, then maybe we do need some space. I heard him take a sharp breath. Are you seriously giving me an ultimatum right now? No. I'm telling you the truth. I love you, Darren. I always will. You're my son, and nothing changes that. But I won't apologize for finding happiness. Not anymore. The line went quiet. For a moment, I thought he'd hung up. Then his voice came back, small and defensive. Brittany says you're trying to manipulate everyone. That you're playing the victim. Something cold settled in my chest. Is that what you think? Another pause. I don't know what to think anymore. Then maybe you should figure it out, I said. And when you do, I'll be here. But I won't sit around waiting for you to decide if I'm worthy of your time. Not anymore. Before he could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. Harold was beside me in an instant, pulling me into his arms. You did good, Maggie, he whispered. That took courage. But it didn't feel like courage. It felt like heartbreak. Because I'd just drawn a line with my own son, and I had no idea which side of it he'd choose to stand on. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Ellen called, ecstatic about the video's success. Maggie. It's at 500,000 views. People are tagging their friends, sharing their own stories. This is incredible. My sister Linda called too. I saw the video. It's beautiful, Maggie. I'm proud of you. Then quieter, Darren called me. He's upset. I know. He'll come around. Give him time. But would he? And if he didn't, could I live with that? That night, I couldn't stop checking the video. The comment section was overwhelming, thousands of messages from strangers who'd been moved by our story. Some were from other mothers who'd been excluded by their children. Some were from people who'd lost love and thought they'd never find it again. Some were just kind words from people who saw two people in their 60s getting a second chance and felt hopeful. But mixed in with the positive comments were the negative ones. People saying I was attention-seeking. That I was vindictive. That getting married a week after my son's wedding was clearly a calculated move to hurt him. You're reading the bad comments, Harold said, looking over my shoulder. I can't help it. Yes, you can. Close the phone. Come to bed. But I kept scrolling. One comment in particular caught my eye. This woman raised a son who didn't want her at his wedding. Maybe she should ask herself why. The words hit like a punch. Maybe I should ask myself why. What had I done wrong? How had I raised a son who could cast me aside so easily? Maggie. Harold gently took the phone from my hands. You can't do this to yourself. You're not responsible for Darren's choices. You were a good mother. You are a good mother. Sometimes good mothers still raise children who disappoint them. I wanted to believe him. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. Not in getting married, that was right. But in letting the video go public. In not considering how it would affect Darren. Was I being selfish? Was this whole thing just elaborate revenge disguised as self-care? The questions kept me awake until dawn. And when morning came, everything got worse. Because the video hadn't just caught the attention of strangers on the internet. It had caught the attention of the local news. A reporter named Jessica Chun from Channel 7 called my phone at 8 in the morning. Mrs. Whitmore? This is Jessica Chun from Channel 7 News. We'd love to do a story on you and your husband. The second chance at love angle is really resonating with our viewers. Would you be available for an interview? I stared at the phone in disbelief. The news? You want to put this on the news? If you're comfortable with it, yes. Your story is inspiring. We'd love to share it with our community. I should have said no. I should have kept it small, kept it private. But something in me, that same stubborn part that had said yes to Harold and yes to posting the video, said yes to this too. Okay, I heard myself say. Let's do it. Harold looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maggie, are you sure about this? No, I admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. The interview was scheduled for that afternoon. Jessica and her camera crew showed up at our house with lights and microphones and all the intimidating equipment that comes with television news. She asked me about Harold, about our love story, about the wedding. And then she asked the question I'd been dreading. We understand your son got married just a week before you. Was there any tension around that timing? I could have lied. I could have said everything was fine. But I was so tired of lying, of smoothing things over, of protecting people who hadn't protected me. My son didn't invite me to his wedding, I said simply. So I created my own moment of joy instead. Jessica's eyes widened. He didn't invite you? His own mother. That's correct. How did that make you feel? Heartbroken, I said honestly, but also determined. Determined not to let someone else's rejection define my worth. The interview aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. And by midnight, it had been picked up by news stations across the country. My phone exploded. Again. More messages than I could count. Some supportive, some critical, all of them having opinions about my life, my choices, my relationship with my son. And Darren? He called at 11:30 that night, his voice shaking with fury. You went on the news? You told the entire world that I didn't invite you to my wedding. I told the truth, I said. You made me look like a monster. I made you look like someone who made a choice. That's all. This has to stop, Mom. The video, the interviews, all of it. You need to make it stop. I can't make it stop. It's already out there. Then make a retraction. Say you were wrong, say it was a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. You didn't invite me. That happened. I hate you right now, he said, his voice breaking. I actually hate you. The words hit like a physical blow. But before I could respond, he hung up. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, phone in hand, wondering if I'd just destroyed my relationship with my son forever. And wondering if standing up for myself had been worth it. Harold held me while I cried. But he didn't try to tell me everything would be okay. Because maybe it wouldn't be. Maybe this was the price of choosing myself, losing the person I'd given up everything for. The next morning, everything changed again. Because Brittany posted her own video response. And it was about to turn my story into something much bigger, and much messier, than I'd ever imagined. I woke up to 47 missed calls and a text from Ellen that just said, check Instagram. Now. My stomach dropped. I knew, even before I looked, that something bad had happened. You develop an instinct for disaster when you've lived long enough. Harold was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with his phone in his hand. His face was pale. What is it? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Brittany posted something. About you. About the whole situation. I grabbed my phone and opened Instagram. There it was, a video of Brittany sitting in what looked like her perfectly decorated living room, makeup flawless, ring glittering on her finger as she gestured while speaking. The caption read, "It's time to tell the truth about my mother-in-law." I pressed play, my heart hammering. Hi everyone, Brittany began, her voice calm and measured. I normally don't address personal matters online, but given the recent viral video about my husband's mother, I feel like I need to set the record straight. She paused, looking directly at the camera with what appeared to be practiced sincerity. Margaret wants everyone to believe she was cruelly excluded from our wedding. That we're heartless people who cast aside a loving mother for no reason. But that's not the full story. My hands started shaking. Harold moved closer, putting his arm around me. The truth is, Brittany continued, Margaret has been difficult from day one. She's made passive-aggressive comments about my career, my choices, even my cooking. At our housewarming party, she brought an uninvited casserole and got upset when we didn't serve it. She's shown up unannounced multiple times. She's criticized how we decorate our home, how we spend our money, how we live our lives. Each word felt like a knife. Some of what she was saying was technically true, but twisted. I had brought a casserole to the housewarming, because that's what families do. I had shown up unannounced, twice, when Darren had told me to stop by any time. When it came to the wedding, Brittany went on, we tried to include her. We really did. But she made it clear she didn't approve of me, didn't approve of our relationship. Darren was caught in the middle, trying to keep everyone happy. Eventually, we made the painful decision that it would be better for everyone if she sat this one out. To avoid conflict. To keep the peace. She dabbed at her eye with a tissue, though I didn't see any actual tears. And then, a week later, she got married. Not because she fell in love, she'd apparently been seeing this man for over a year without telling anyone. But because she wanted to hurt us. She wanted to steal our moment. And when that video went viral, when she went on the news and painted herself as the victim, it broke my heart. Because we're not the villains here. We're just a young couple trying to start our lives together without toxic family drama. The video ended with her looking directly into the camera. Sometimes, setting boundaries with family is the healthiest thing you can do. Even when they try to make you look like the bad guy for it. I set my phone down, feeling sick. The comment section was already filling up, hundreds of people taking Brittany's side, calling me manipulative, narcissistic, a toxic mother-in-law. The narrative had shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the wronged mother. I was the problem. Do you believe there are always two sides to every story? Or are some actions inexcusable no matter what? I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Harold was reading something on his own phone, his jaw tight. This is all over Facebook too. Someone shared it in one of those wedding shaming groups. The comments. He trailed off, not wanting to hurt me more. But I grabbed his phone and looked anyway. The comments were brutal. Classic narcissistic mother trying to ruin her son's happiness. I bet she was a nightmare mother-in-law. Good for them for setting boundaries. Getting married a week later? That's psycho behavior. She's playing the victim, but she's clearly the aggressor here. I felt the room spinning. Everything I'd said about standing up for myself, about reclaiming my dignity, suddenly seemed pathetic and delusional. What if Brittany was right? What if I was the problem? My phone rang. Linda. Maggie, I just saw Brittany's video. Are you okay? I don't know, I said honestly. Is she right? Am I toxic? What? No. Maggie, that girl is twisting everything. You're not perfect, none of us are, but you're not what she's describing. But some of it's true. I did bring that casserole. I did show up unannounced. Because you're a mother. Because you love your son. That's normal family behavior, not some calculated manipulation. But was it? I thought about all those times I'd shown up with food, with gifts, with advice Darren hadn't asked for. Had I been overbearing without realizing it? Had I driven him away with my need to stay relevant in his life? Ellen called next. Maggie, don't you dare believe a word that woman said. She's doing damage control because the internet made her look bad. This is spin, pure and simple. But what if she's not wrong? What if I am difficult? Maggie Whitmore, listen to me. You are kind and generous, and you've given everything to that boy. The fact that his wife is threatened by you says more about her insecurities than your behavior. But the comments kept coming. By noon, Brittany's video had almost as many views as mine. The internet was picking sides, creating a whole narrative about toxic mothers and justified boundaries and whether my wedding had been revenge or self-care. Someone created a poll, Team Margaret or Team Brittany? Like my life was a reality show instead of real pain. Then things got even worse. Because at 2 o'clock that afternoon, Darren posted his own statement. It was just text on a black background, no video, but the words hit harder than anything Brittany had said. My mother and I have had a complicated relationship. I love her, but love doesn't mean accepting behavior that hurts you. Brittany and I made a difficult choice regarding our wedding, and while I wish things were different, I stand by that decision. My wife and I deserve to start our marriage without public drama or family manipulation. I'm asking everyone to respect our privacy and stop turning our personal life into entertainment. That last line felt aimed directly at me. Stop turning our personal life into entertainment. Like I'd done this for attention instead of survival. Harold found me sitting on the bathroom floor, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. He sat down next to me, not saying anything, just being there. I ruined everything, I gasped between sobs. I destroyed my relationship with my son. I made myself look like a fool online. And for what? For pride? For revenge? For yourself, Harold said firmly. You did this for yourself, Maggie. You got married because you love me and I love you. Everything else, the video, the attention, all of it, that was never the point. But now everyone thinks I'm this horrible person. And maybe they're right. They're not right. But even if some people believe Brittany's version, so what? The people who matter know the truth. Darren thinks I'm manipulative. My own son. Harold took my hands. Then maybe Darren needs to grow up and realize his mother is a human being with feelings and needs, not just someone who exists to serve him. I wanted to believe him. But doubt had settled into my bones like a chill I couldn't shake. Over the next few days, the online debate raged on. Think-piece articles appeared on websites, the mother-in-law problem, when family becomes toxic. Setting boundaries with parents, why it's okay to uninvite family from your wedding. The viral wedding video, revenge or empowerment? My story had become a cultural conversation about family dynamics, boundaries, and generational conflict. Everyone had an opinion. Marriage counselors weighed in. Therapists gave their professional analysis. Random people on Twitter argued about whether I was justified or just bitter. And through all of it, Darren stayed silent. No calls. No texts. Nothing. My sister Linda came over with groceries and moral support. This will blow over, Maggie. Internet drama always does. Something else will go viral next week and everyone will forget about this. But Darren won't forget. Brittany won't forget. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Linda said carefully. Maybe this needed to happen. Maybe you needed to stop protecting them and start protecting yourself. Mrs. Chun from next door stopped by too, bringing soup and her no-nonsense wisdom. That boy of yours needs to remember where he came from. My children try that disrespect with me? I straighten them out quick. You did nothing wrong, Margaret. But had I done something wrong? The question haunted me every waking moment. Yes, Darren had hurt me. Yes, I deserved happiness. But had posting that video, doing that interview, been the right response? Or had I let my hurt turn into something uglier? A week after Brittany's response video, I got an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitmore? This is Sarah Michaels from Good Morning America. My heart stopped. Good Morning America? We've been following your story, Sarah continued. The viral wedding video, the family conflict, all of it. We'd love to have you on the show to tell your side of the story. Would you be interested? This was insane. This was too much. This was my actual life being treated like a circus sideshow. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. But Mrs. Whitmore? We're also reaching out to your son and daughter-in-law. They haven't agreed to anything yet, but there's interest on their end too. This could be an opportunity to have a real conversation, in a safe space, with professional mediation. After I hung up, I sat with that for a long time. Good Morning America. National television. My family drama broadcast to millions of people. It was absurd. It was horrifying. And part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, wondered if it might be exactly what we needed. Because Darren wasn't talking to me. Maybe he'd talk on television. Harold was adamantly against it. Maggie, this has gotten too big. You need to step back before it destroys what's left of your relationship with Darren. What relationship? I asked. He called me a manipulator. He told me he hated me. What's left to destroy? There's always something left. But if you do this, if you go on national television and make this even more public, there might not be any way back. He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew that Darren needed to hear what I had to say. And if the only way to make him listen was to say it in front of millions of people, then maybe that's what I had to do. I called Sarah Michaels back. I'll do the interview. But only if Darren agrees to be there too. We'll make that happen, she promised. 3 days later, I got confirmation. Darren and Brittany had agreed to appear on Good Morning America. We'd all be there, sitting across from each other on live television, having the conversation we should have had in private months ago. Ellen thought it was a terrible idea. Linda thought it was a terrible idea. Harold thought it was a terrible idea. But I was doing it anyway. Because I was tired of being misunderstood. Tired of being painted as the villain or the victim. I just wanted to be seen as Margaret, a woman who'd loved her son his entire life and didn't understand how that love had become something to resent. The night before the interview, I barely slept. I kept practicing what I'd say, how I'd explain myself. I wanted to be calm, rational, measured. Not angry or defensive or hurt. But mostly, I wanted my son to look at me, really look at me, and remember who I was. Who I'd always been. The woman who'd held him when he cried. Who'd cheered at every basketball game. Who'd worked 3 jobs to pay for his education. Who'd loved him so completely that losing him felt like losing a part of my own body. At dawn, I got dressed in a simple blue blouse and black pants. Harold helped me with my makeup, his hands gentle and steady. "Whatever happens today," he said, "I'm proud of you. You're the bravest person I know." "Or the stupidest," I said, trying to smile. "Sometimes they're the same thing." The car that Good Morning America sent arrived at 6 in the morning. As I climbed into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. I looked older, tired, but also determined. This was it. The moment where everything would either fall apart completely or somehow, impossibly, start to heal. And I had absolutely no idea which one it would be. Chapter 8. The green room at Good Morning America smelled like coffee and hairspray and nervous energy. I sat on a leather couch, hands folded in my lap, while a makeup artist touched up my face and a producer ran through last-minute details. "You'll be in the second segment," she said briskly. "Robin will ask you about the wedding, about your relationship with your son. Just speak from the heart, be honest, and try not to look directly at the camera." Honest. That was what had gotten me into this mess in the first place. Harold wasn't allowed to come with me, only the people directly involved in the story could be in the studio. He'd kissed me goodbye at the hotel and said, "Remember who you are. Not who they say you are." Through the green room's partially open door, I could hear voices in the hallway. Then I saw them, Darren and Brittany, being led to a different waiting area. They didn't see me, but I saw them. Darren looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at his collar. Brittany looked polished and camera-ready, her hand possessively on his arm. My son. When did we become strangers? A production assistant appeared at my door. "Mrs. Whitmore? You're up in 5 minutes." I stood on shaky legs and followed her down a hallway lined with photos of news anchors and celebrity guests. The studio was bigger than I'd imagined, bright with lights and cameras and crew members moving purposefully around the space. Robin Roberts sat at the anchor desk, reviewing notes. She looked up when I entered and gave me a warm professional smile. "Margaret, thank you so much for being here. I know this isn't easy." "Thank you for having me," I said automatically, though I still wasn't sure this was a good idea. They positioned me on a cream-colored couch, adjusted the lighting, clipped a microphone to my blouse. Someone counted down from 5, and suddenly we were live, broadcasting to millions of people across the country. Robin turned to the camera with practiced ease. "Coming up, we have an exclusive interview about a wedding video that's divided the internet. A mother uninvited from her son's wedding who then got married herself just 1 week later. Some are calling it empowering. Others say it's revenge. Margaret Whitmore is here to tell us her side of the story." She turned to me, her expression shifting from broadcaster to concerned interviewer. "Margaret, thank you for being here. Let's start from the beginning. Your son called you to tell you that you weren't invited to his wedding. What was that conversation like?" The memory washed over me, standing in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, the world tilting. "It was brief," I said, choosing my words carefully. "He told me his fiancée didn't like me, and that my presence would make things awkward. He asked me to understand." "And what did you say?" I said I understood. Because what else could I say? I wasn't going to beg to attend my own son's wedding. Robin nodded sympathetically. "That must have been devastating." "It was the worst moment of my life," I said honestly. "Worse than losing my husband, in some ways. Because that was death, something beyond anyone's control. This was a choice. My son chose to exclude me. And then, a week later, you got married yourself. Some people are saying the timing seems deliberate. What do you say to that?" This was the question I'd been dreading. The one where I could either defend myself or tell the truth. I chose truth. The timing was deliberate, I admitted. I won't lie about that. Harold had proposed to me months earlier, and I'd said no because I didn't want to overshadow Darren's engagement. I spent so much of my life putting my happiness on hold for my son. But when he uninvited me, something clicked. I realized I'd been waiting for permission to live my own life. Permission that was never going to come. So you got married. I got married because I love Harold and he loves me. But did I choose that specific weekend because of the timing? Yes, I did. Because I needed to prove to myself that I still mattered. That I wasn't just someone who could be discarded without consequence. Was that revenge? Maybe. Was it also self-preservation? Definitely. Have you ever had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting someone else's feelings? Share your experience below. Robin leaned forward slightly. Your daughter-in-law Brittany posted a response video. She says you've been difficult, that you made passive-aggressive comments, that you didn't respect their boundaries. How do you respond to that? I took a breath. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. Yes, I brought a casserole to their housewarming party, because in my generation, that's what families do. Yes, I showed up unannounced a couple times, because my son had told me I was always welcome. If those things made me seem overbearing, I apologize. But I never set out to be difficult. I just wanted to be part of my son's life. But Brittany feels you crossed boundaries. Then I wish she'd told me that. I wish they'd had a conversation with me about what boundaries they needed instead of just cutting me out of the wedding entirely. Exclusion isn't boundary setting. It's punishment. Robin paused, letting that statement sit. Then, your son and his wife are here today. Would you like to speak with them? My heart lurched. Yes, I would. The camera pulled back as Darren and Brittany were brought onto the set. They sat on a couch opposite mine, a coffee table between us that might as well have been the Grand Canyon. Darren wouldn't meet my eyes. Brittany sat rigid, her hand clasped in his. Darren, Robin said gently, you're seeing your mother for the first time since this all became public. What do you want to say to her? Darren finally looked up, his face tight with emotion. I want to say, I'm hurt, Mom. I'm hurt that you turned something private into a public spectacle. That you went on the news and made me look like a terrible son. You uninvited me from your wedding, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. How did you expect me to feel? I expected you to respect our decision. To understand that sometimes, people need space. Space from what? From being loved? From having a mother who cares about you? Brittany jumped in, her voice sharp. You don't get to play the victim here, Margaret. You've been undermining our relationship from day one. I haven't undermined anything. I've been trying to be part of your lives, and you've treated me like an inconvenience. Because you are. Brittany's composure cracked. You're always there, always hovering, always with an opinion about how we should live. We needed one day, one single day, without your presence looming over it. The words hit like a physical blow. Always hovering. Always there. Is that what I'd become? The overbearing mother who couldn't let go? Robin interjected carefully. It sounds like there are a lot of unresolved feelings here. Darren, your mother raised you alone after your father died. She sacrificed a lot for you. Do you acknowledge that? Darren's jaw tightened. Of course I acknowledge it. I'm grateful for everything she did. But gratitude doesn't mean I owe her access to every part of my life. It doesn't mean she gets to make my wedding day about her pain. I didn't make your wedding about anything, I said. I wasn't even there. But you made sure everyone knew you weren't there. You made sure the whole world knew I was the son who excluded his mother. Do you have any idea what that's done to me? To us? His voice was rising now, real anger breaking through. And seeing him angry, seeing him hurt, made something inside me crack wide open. I'm sorry, I said, and the tears came before I could stop them. I'm sorry if I've been too much. I'm sorry if I made you feel suffocated. I'm sorry if loving you so much made me blind to what you actually needed. But Darren, I'm your mother. I carried you in my body. I held you through every nightmare. I gave up everything, my career, my savings, my entire life, to make sure you had opportunities one never had. And when you told me I wasn't good enough to attend your wedding, it broke something in me that I don't know how to fix. The studio was completely silent. Even the camera operators had stopped moving. Darren's face crumpled. I never said you weren't good enough. You didn't have to say it. You just erased me. Like I never mattered. You matter, he said, and his voice was thick with tears now too. Of course you matter. But Mom, you have to let me live my own life. You have to let me make my own choices, even if those choices hurt you sometimes. Even if those choices mean excluding me from the most important day of your life? He looked down at his hands. I don't know, he said quietly. Maybe we made the wrong choice. Maybe we should have handled it differently. But once you went public with everything, once you made it into this media circus, it stopped being about a wedding. It became about who was right and who was wrong. And I couldn't find my way back to you through all the noise. Robin leaned forward. It sounds like both of you are saying you want to repair this relationship. Is that true? I don't know if we can, Darren said. There's so much damage now. There's always a way back, I said, looking directly at my son. If both people want it. Do you want it? He met my eyes finally, and I saw the little boy I'd raised. The one who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who'd cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend broke his heart. That boy was still in there somewhere, underneath the anger and the hurt and the influence of the woman sitting next to him. I miss you, he said, his voice breaking. I miss my mom. But I don't know how to miss you without Brittany thinking I'm betraying her. Brittany stiffened beside him. Robin turned to her. Brittany, do you see a path forward here? Brittany looked between me and Darren, her expression conflicted. For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw something in her face that wasn't anger or defensiveness. I saw fear. I was terrified of you, she said finally, looking at me. From the first moment I met you. You were this perfect mother who'd sacrificed everything, and I could never live up to that. Every casserole you brought, every time you showed up, every story about Darren's childhood, it all reminded me that I was the outsider. That you'd always be more important to him than I was. The confession hung in the air between us. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about me being difficult or overbearing. This was about a young woman trying to claim her place in my son's life while I unconsciously held onto mine. I never wanted to compete with you, I said softly. I just didn't know how to stop being his mother. How to be something else. Something that gave you both space to build your own family. Maybe we all made mistakes, Robin said. The question is, what happens now? What happens now? I looked at my son, at this man I'd raised, and I realized something. Loving him meant letting him go. Really letting him go. Not just physically, but emotionally. It meant accepting that his wife would come first now, that I'd moved from the center of his life to somewhere on the periphery. That was the natural order of things, and I'd been fighting it because it felt like loss. But maybe it didn't have to be loss. Maybe it could be evolution. I propose something, I said, looking at both of them. I'll stop showing up unannounced. I'll stop bringing casseroles unless you specifically ask. I'll give you the space you need to build your marriage. But in return, I need you to stop treating me like I'm toxic. I need you to acknowledge that my love for you, Darren, even when it's imperfect, comes from a real place. And I need an invitation back into your life, not center stage, just somewhere in the audience. Darren looked at Brittany. She looked back at him. Something passed between them, some silent conversation that couples have when they've been together long enough to communicate without words. Okay, Brittany said finally. I can try that. But I need you to understand that I'm not trying to replace you or erase you. I'm just trying to be his wife. I understand, I said. And I meant it. And the wedding, Darren said. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry we handled it that way. You should have been there. Brittany and I talked about it on the way here. We want to do something, maybe a small ceremony renewal next year, something intimate. And we want you there. If you want to come. The tears came freely now. Of course I want to come. Robin smiled, the kind of smile that said this was the resolution America wanted to see. This is beautiful. But I have to ask, Margaret, do you regret posting your wedding video? Do you regret how public this all became? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Did I regret it? I regret the pain it caused, I said honestly. I regret that my son felt ambushed. But do I regret claiming my own happiness? Do I regret marrying Harold and letting the world see that older women can start over? No. I don't regret that. Even with everything that happened, I'd make the same choice again. Because for the first time in decades, I chose myself. And that matters. The interview wrapped up with Robin thanking us all for our honesty and vulnerability. As the cameras stopped rolling, Darren stood and walked over to my couch. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms. I fell into them, crying into his shoulder like he used to cry into mine when he was small. "I love you," I whispered. "I've always loved you." "I know, Mom. I love you too." Brittany stayed on her couch, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. But she didn't look angry anymore. Just tired. We were all so tired. After the taping, the three of us went to a quiet diner around the corner from the studio. It was awkward at first, all of us navigating this new dynamic where we were trying to be honest instead of polite. But slowly, over coffee and pancakes, we started talking. Really talking. Brittany told me about growing up with a mother who'd abandoned her, about how my presence in Darren's life had triggered all her fears about not being enough. Darren admitted he'd been caught between us, trying to keep everyone happy and ending up hurting both of us instead. And I told them about the loneliness of the last 10 years. About how much I'd struggled to find purpose after Thomas died, after Darren moved away. About how Harold had given me back something I'd lost, the feeling of being seen as a whole person, not just a role. It wasn't a fairy tale resolution. We didn't leave that diner as one big happy family. But we left with something, understanding. And maybe, eventually, that understanding could grow into forgiveness. And forgiveness into healing. When I got back to the hotel, Harold was waiting. He took one look at my face and pulled me into his arms. "How did it go?" "We talked. Really talked. It's not fixed, but it's not completely broken anymore either." He kissed the top of my head. "That's all anyone can ask for." That night, lying in bed next to my husband, I thought about everything that had happened over the past month. The exclusion. The wedding. The video. The national attention. The confrontation. Had it been worth it? All the pain and drama and public scrutiny? I still didn't know. But I knew this: I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. I'd stopped making myself smaller to accommodate other people's comfort. And whatever came next, whether my relationship with Darren fully healed or remained complicated, I'd face it as Margaret Whitmore, a woman who'd finally learned to choose herself. And that, I realized, was worth everything. 3 weeks after the Good Morning America interview, life started to feel almost normal again. The internet had moved on to its next controversy. The news cycle had shifted. My phone stopped buzzing with constant notifications. But some things had changed permanently. Darren called me every Sunday now. Just to check in, to talk about his week, to ask about mine. The conversations were sometimes stilted, both of us trying too hard, but they were happening. That was something. Brittany had sent me a friend request on Facebook, a small gesture that felt monumental. I'd accepted it immediately, then spent 20 minutes overthinking whether to like her posts or if that would seem too eager. "You're overthinking it," Harold said, watching me stare at my phone. "Just be yourself." "That's what got me into trouble in the first place," I muttered, but I liked the post anyway. A picture of Brittany and Darren at brunch. They looked happy. That's what mattered. Ellen stopped by with print copies of our wedding photos. She'd put them in a beautiful album, professionally bound, with the best shots from that day. Harold and me exchanging vows. The kiss. Walking on the beach. Us laughing at something someone had said. "These are incredible," I breathed, turning the pages. "You two are incredible," Ellen said. "Despite everything that happened after, that day was perfect. Don't let the drama steal the joy from you." She was right. Whatever had come after, the viral video, the family conflict, the media attention, none of it changed what had actually happened on that beach. Two people who'd found love later in life had made a commitment to each other. That was real. That mattered. Linda called with interesting news. "You're never going to believe this, but I got a call from a woman named Patricia Chun. She runs a non-profit for widows and widowers. She saw your interview and wants to know if you'd be willing to speak at one of their events. About finding love after loss, about starting over. What do you think?" I thought about it. Public speaking had never been my thing. I'd taught second graders, not adults. But the idea of talking to other widows, other people who'd felt that particular kind of loneliness, appealed to me. "Tell her yes," I said. I'll do it. The speaking event was scheduled for 2 months out. In the meantime, I started getting emails from people who'd seen my story. Women in their 60s and 70s who'd thought their romantic lives were over. Mothers who'd been excluded by their children. People who'd felt invisible and wanted to share that they felt seen. One email in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman named Dorothy in Minnesota. Dear Margaret, I'm 71 and my daughter hasn't spoken to me in 5 years over a fight I don't even fully understand. I thought I'd die without ever reconciling with her. Your story gave me the courage to reach out one more time. We talked on the phone for 3 hours yesterday. We have a long way to go, but we're talking. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to try. I read that email to Harold, my voice catching. Maybe some good came out of all this mess after all. Of course it did, he said. You told the truth. Truth always matters, even when it's messy. Have you ever shared your story and had it help someone else in an unexpected way? Sometimes our worst moments can become someone else's inspiration. Tell me your story in the comments. One afternoon, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, Mrs. Whitmore. This is Sarah from the publisher Heartstone Press. We'd like to talk to you about writing a book. A book. About my life, my story, the whole viral wedding saga. They were offering a contract, an advance professional support to help me write it. I'm not a writer, I protested. You don't have to be. We'll provide a co-author. We just need your story, your voice, your truth. There are millions of women who need to hear this. Will you think about it? I said I'd think about it, then immediately called Linda. They want me to write a book. Is this crazy? Probably, Linda laughed. But you should do it anyway. When else are you going to get an opportunity like this? Harold was more cautious. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, Maggie. Not for money or fame, but because you have something to say. Did I have something to say? I thought about all the years I'd spent silent, accommodating, making myself smaller. I thought about all the women like me who'd given everything to their families and forgotten to save something for themselves. Maybe I did have something to say after all. I called Sarah back. Let's do it. The co-author they assigned was a woman named Jennifer Brooks, a professional writer who specialized in memoirs. We met for coffee, and she asked me to tell her my story, not just the viral video part, but everything. My marriage to Thomas, raising Darren alone, the loneliness of widowhood, meeting Harold, the exclusion, the wedding, the aftermath. She listened for 3 hours, taking notes, asking questions, helping me see patterns I hadn't noticed. Your story isn't really about a wedding, she said. It's about a woman learning to exist outside of her roles as wife and mother. It's about reclaiming identity after loss. We worked on the book for months. It was harder than I expected, not the writing itself, but the remembering. Going back through painful memories, examining my mistakes, being honest about my flaws. Jennifer pushed me to dig deeper, to not just tell what happened but why it mattered. Don't make yourself the hero or the victim, she said. Just be human. That's what people connect with. During this time, my relationship with Darren continued to slowly improve. He and Brittany invited Harold and me to dinner at their apartment, the first time I'd been invited since the housewarming disaster. I brought wine instead of a casserole. Brittany made pasta. It was pleasant, if a bit awkward. Over dessert, Darren said, Mom, I've been thinking about what you said on Good Morning America. About how you sacrificed everything for me. I don't think I ever really understood what that meant until recently. What made you understand? I asked carefully. He glanced at Brittany. We found out last week that we're pregnant. The world stopped. My son. Having a baby. Making me a grandmother. Oh my God, I whispered. That's wonderful. Brittany smiled, her hand on her still flat stomach. We're scared. But excited. And we're going to need help. If you want to be involved. If I wanted to be involved. In my grandchild's life. Of course I wanted to be involved. But this time, I'd be different. I'd be the grandmother who gave space. Who waited to be asked instead of assuming. Who supported without smothering. I'd be honored, I said. On your terms. Whatever you need from me, however much or little, I'm here. Darren's eyes got shiny. Thanks, Mom. When Harold and I left that night, walking to our car in the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not certainty, not the promise that everything would be perfect, but hope that we were moving in the right direction. Grandmother, Harold said, squeezing my hand. How does that feel? Terrifying, I admitted. But good. Really good. 6 months after the viral video, the book was finished. Second Chances, A Mother's Journey to Reclaiming Joy, would be published in the spring. The advance was modest, but Jennifer said if it did well, there could be speaking tours, book clubs, maybe even a podcast. My life had become something I never could have imagined when I was sitting in my kitchen that day, hearing my son tell me I wasn't invited to his wedding. The day before the book was set to release, Darren called. Mom, I read the advance copy you sent me. My stomach dropped. I'd sent him a copy weeks ago but hadn't heard anything. I'd been terrified of what he'd think, how he'd react to seeing our family drama immortalized in print. And? I asked, barely breathing. And I'm glad you wrote it. I don't agree with everything in it. Some parts were hard to read. But I understand you better now. I understand what you were going through. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Relief flooded through me. Thank you for reading it. There's a part near the end, where you talk about how love sometimes means letting go. That really hit me. Because I think that's what I needed from you all along, and I didn't know how to ask for it. And it's what you needed from me too, to let go of the fantasy of who I should be and accept who I am. You're exactly who you should be, I said. I'm so proud of you, Darren. Even when I'm hurt or angry, I'm always proud. I know, Mom. I know. When the book came out, it sold better than anyone expected. It hit a nerve with women of a certain age, mothers who'd struggled with adult children, widows trying to rebuild their lives. Book clubs reached out. Podcasts wanted interviews. Patricia Chen's nonprofit asked me to speak at 3 different events. My story, our story, had become bigger than just one family's drama. It had become a conversation about family dynamics, about aging and identity, about the courage it takes to choose yourself even when everyone says you shouldn't. Ellen joked that I'd become famous in my old age. Who knew that the quiet schoolteacher would end up as the poster child for reclaiming your life at 70? 68, I corrected her. I'm only 68. Only, she laughed. Listen to you. A year ago you were acting like your life was over. Now look at you. She was right. A year ago I'd been sitting alone in my kitchen, eating soup, scrolling through photos of my son's wedding that I hadn't attended. Today I was married to a wonderful man, writing a book, speaking to audiences, reconnecting with my son, about to become a grandmother. The transformation was almost unbelievable. But it hadn't been easy. And it hadn't been clean. There'd been pain and conflict and public humiliation. There'd been moments where I thought I'd destroyed everything I cared about for the sake of pride or revenge or whatever complicated emotion had driven me to post that video. Yet here I was. Not perfect, not completely healed, but whole in a way I hadn't been in years. The lesson, if there was one, wasn't about revenge or justice or proving anyone wrong. It was simpler than that. Sometimes you have to disappoint people to be true to yourself. Sometimes being a good mother means being more than just a mother. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is write your own ending instead of accepting the one others have written for you. 3 months before my grandchild was due, Brittany called me herself, not through Darren, not in a group text but directly. Margaret? I was wondering if you'd want to go shopping with me. 4 baby things. I'd like your advice. My heart swelled. I'd love that. We met at a baby store, and for the first time, it was just the 2 of us. No Darren to mediate, no old resentments hovering between us. Just 2 women trying to build something new. As we looked at cribs and onesies and tiny shoes that seemed impossibly small, Brittany said, I was threatened by you. I know you know that now. But what I didn't understand until recently was that you weren't trying to replace me or compete with me. You were just trying not to disappear. I admitted. I was terrified of becoming irrelevant. You could never be irrelevant, Brittany said. You're this baby's grandmother. You're Darren's mother. You're part of our story now, whether I was ready for that or not. I'm ready now. Or at least, I'm trying to be. That's all I can ask for, I said. We shopped for 2 hours, laughing over ridiculous baby gadgets, debating color schemes, imagining what this little person would be like. And in that store, surrounded by the tiny artifacts of new life, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace. Not perfect peace, but the kind that comes from knowing you've survived the storm and found your way to calmer waters. That night, I told Harold about the shopping trip. I think we're going to be okay. Not perfect, but okay. Perfect is overrated anyway, he said, pulling me close. Okay is plenty. He was right. Okay was plenty. More than plenty. After everything we'd been through, okay felt like a miracle. The call came at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in March. I fumbled for my phone, heart racing because calls at 3 a.m. are never good news. Mom. Darren's voice was breathless, excited. It's time. We're heading to the hospital. The baby's coming. I was out of bed in seconds, Harold groaning beside me. What's happening? The baby, I said, already pulling on clothes. Darren's baby. Our grandchild. It's coming. We made it to the hospital in record time. The waiting room was quiet at this hour, just a few other nervous-looking people clutching coffee cups and staring at their phones. Linda showed up an hour later, then Harold's brother James, who'd been visiting for the week. 7 hours. That's how long we waited. 7 hours of pacing and bad coffee and checking our phones every 30 seconds for updates. Then finally, at 10:15 in the morning, Darren appeared in the doorway. His hair was a mess, his eyes were red, but his smile was the biggest I'd ever seen. It's a girl, he said. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Everyone's healthy. Brittany's amazing. The baby's perfect. A girl. My granddaughter. I started crying right there in the waiting room, Harold's arm around me, Linda squeezing my hand. Can we see her? I asked through tears. Give us 20 minutes. They're getting cleaned up. But yeah, Mom. Come meet your granddaughter. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. But finally, a nurse came to get us, leading us down a hallway to a room where Brittany sat in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. Darren stood next to her, one hand on her shoulder, looking at his daughter like she was the most miraculous thing he'd ever seen. Which I supposed she was. Mom, he said softly. Meet Eleanor Thomas Winters. Eleanor after Brittany's grandmother, Thomas after Dad. My breath caught. Thomas. They'd named her after my late husband. After Darren's father. Brittany looked up at me, tears in her eyes. We wanted to honor him. To make sure she knows where she comes from. I couldn't speak. Could only nod and wipe my face and stare at this tiny perfect person who carried my husband's name. Do you want to hold her? Brittany asked. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. You're her grandmother. With shaking hands, I took Eleanor, supporting her tiny head like the nurse instructed. She was so small, so fragile, with a little scrunched-up face and impossibly tiny fingers. She yawned, and her whole face transformed, and something in my chest cracked open. This was new life. New beginning. New chance to get things right. Hello, Eleanor, I whispered. I'm your Grandma Margaret. And I promise you, I'm going to love you perfectly. Not the way I loved your daddy, I made mistakes there. But better. Wiser. I'm going to let your parents lead, and I'm going to support without smothering, and I'm going to be there whenever you need me but give you space when you don't. I promise. Harold was crying beside me. Linda was taking photos. Darren had his arm around Brittany, and they were both watching me with this expression I couldn't quite name. Trust, maybe. Or hope. We stayed at the hospital for an hour, taking turns holding Eleanor, marveling at her tiny perfection. When it was time to go, to let the new parents rest, I kissed Brittany's forehead and Darren's cheek. Thank you, I said. For letting me be here. For giving me another chance. Thank you for everything you did to get me here, Darren said. I know I haven't said it enough, but I'm grateful, Mom. For all of it. In the car on the way home, I stared out the window at the city passing by. 1 year ago, I'd been excluded from my son's wedding, eating soup alone in my kitchen, convinced my life was over. Today I was a wife, a grandmother, an author, a woman who'd found her voice and her purpose. The journey from there to here had been messy and painful and public in ways I'd never wanted. But it had also been necessary. Because sometimes you have to fall apart to rebuild yourself into something stronger. What are you thinking? Harold asked, glancing over at me as he drove. I'm thinking about that phone call. The one where Darren told me I wasn't invited to his wedding. And I'm thinking that maybe it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Because it forced me to stop waiting for my life to begin again. It forced me to choose myself. Harold reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm glad you chose yourself. Because that meant you chose us too. Best decision I ever made, I said, squeezing back. 2 weeks later, I gave my first major speech at Patricia Chen's non-profit event. 200 widows and widowers filled a community center, all of them looking for hope, for proof that life could still hold joy after devastating loss. I stood at the podium, looking out at all those faces, and I told them my story. Not just the viral video part, but all of it. Meeting Thomas, losing Thomas, the lonely years after, meeting Harold, the conflict with Darren, the wedding, the aftermath, the reconciliation. The whole messy, imperfect, human truth of it. I'm not here to tell you I have all the answers, I said. Because I don't. I'm here to tell you that it's okay to be messy. It's okay to make mistakes while you're figuring out who you are after loss. It's okay to choose yourself, even when people judge you for it. And it's never, ever too late to start writing a new chapter. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, dozens of people came up to share their stories. Widows who'd remarried and felt guilty, mothers estranged from their children, people who'd given up everything for family and forgotten to save something for themselves. I listened to each one, offering what wisdom I could. And I realized, this was my purpose now. Not just being a mother or a wife or a grandmother, though I was all those things. But being someone who'd survived and could show others that survival was possible. The book continued to sell well. A documentary filmmaker reached out about making a film. Ellen joked that I was going to end up with my own reality show. God, I hope not, I laughed. I've had enough reality for one lifetime. But the truth was, I loved this new reality. Teaching again, in a different way. Connecting with people. Using my story to help others. And doing it all with Harold by my side, this unexpected gift of late-life love who made every day feel like a second chance. 6 months after Eleanor was born, Darren and Brittany asked if Harold and I would like to be her godparents. Not religious godparents, neither of them were particularly religious, but the kind who'd be there for her always, who'd help guide and support her as she grew. We want her to know you, Brittany said. Both of you. We want her to grow up understanding that family is complicated and imperfect, but also that love can survive mistakes. You and Darren survived your mistakes. That's important for her to see. I accepted, honored and humbled and grateful beyond words. At the small ceremony we held in their apartment, I held Eleanor and made the same promise I'd made in the hospital: I'll love you well. I'll be here when you need me and give you space when you don't. I'll support your parents in raising you, and I'll never put them in a position where they have to choose between us. This is my promise to you. Eleanor grabbed my finger with her tiny hand and held on tight. And I thought, this is what redemption looks like. Not perfection. Not erasing past mistakes. Just being given another chance and choosing to do better with it. Now, as I sit here writing the final words of this story, Eleanor is sleeping in a crib in the next room. Darren and Brittany asked if Harold and I could babysit while they went to dinner. Just the two of us and this tiny person who represents everything good that came from all the pain. Was it worth it? The exclusion, the conflict, the public drama, the damaged relationships that took months to repair? I think about the woman I was a year and a half ago. Small, accommodating, invisible. Waiting for permission to be happy. Putting everyone else's needs before her own until she'd forgotten she had needs at all. I think about the woman I am now. Married to someone who sees me. Connected to my son in a healthier, more honest way. About to be part of my granddaughter's life. Writing, speaking, helping others. Taking up space unapologetically. Yes. It was worth it. Not because revenge feels good, it doesn't, not really. But because choosing yourself, even when it's messy and painful and public, is always worth it. Because you can't love others well if you've forgotten how to love yourself. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to disappear. I didn't attend my son's wedding. But the world attended mine. And in the end, that wasn't about competition or revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about reclaiming my story. About refusing to let anyone else write my ending. And the ending I wrote, the one where a retired schoolteacher in her late 60s found love and voice and purpose, turned out to be more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. Quiet justice isn't about shouting or punishing or making others suffer. It's about living so fully, so authentically, so unapologetically yourself that your very existence becomes a statement. That's the justice I found. And that's the life I'm living now. To every mother who's felt forgotten, to every widow who thought her story was over, to every woman who's made herself smaller to accommodate others, it's not too late. Write your own ending. Choose yourself. And watch what happens when you refuse to be invisible. Eleanor stirs in the next room. Harold is making dinner. Through the window I can see the sun setting, painting the sky in colors I don't have names for. And I'm here in this moment, fully present, fully alive, fully me. That's not revenge. That's freedom. And freedom is the sweetest victory of all.